Let's face it, unless you've been under a rock, you know that VMware has jacked their pricing. And I think one of the biggest problems with VMware jacking their pricing is that migrating in a lot of ways to hypervisor has become a serious task. Now, whether you've attempted to do this using third-party applications like StarWind, or you've used backup solutions like Veeam, or even Datto, you know that the replication to a hypervisor configuration is really hit or miss. So in today's video, I figured, you know what? I should show you guys how to convert a VMware VMDK file to a Microsoft Hypervisor VHDX file, and how to do it free. The first thing you're going to need to do is start off with a base configuration of Ubuntu, the desktop operating system, not the server. In this video, we're using version 24.04.04, which I believe is the latest in the LTS versions. I'll tell you right off the bat that there are alternatives that don't require Linux. However, the Linux alternative is the best alternative in order to get this to work. You see, if you're on Windows and you want to convert a V to V, you could use the freeware software that comes from StarWind. The downside to the StarWind software is that if your configuration in VMware is lazy zeroed and you're using a thin provision, then generally speaking, in older versions of VMware, that's going to automatically mean that you're running an MBR. So one of the limitations of an MBR in Microsoft Windows world is that you have a 2 terabyte ceiling, meaning that if the disk goes over 2 terabytes, it will automatically corrupt. And unfortunately, the way this StarWind application does work, what it tends to do is it converts the entire image, meaning that if you have a C drive, a D drive, and an E drive, and they're all different VMDK files, and you use this software, it tends to try to combine them into a single VHDX file. And unfortunately, if you're at 2 terabytes on each one of those configured drives, when it does the conversion, it will combine them into a total of 6 terabytes, which is totally fine. But if you're over that 2 terabytes limit for the MBR, it just automatically corrupts the boot volume of the VHDX file, and then the system simply will not boot the disk. So this application works great if you're in a situation where you want to do a conversion from VMware to Microsoft Hypervisor, but you're either running GPT disks or you're using a thick provision. So in other words, you're not allocating only a limited amount of space, but you're allocating the full disk size of the allocation. In other words, if you have it set to like 2 terabytes max and it's thick provisioned, when it goes to create the new disk, the VHDX file it creates limits the actual size of each one of those partition tables, and as a result, it will boot. However, if you have them thin provisioned, lazy zeroed with an MBR, and you run this application, it will corrupt it on the process of migrating, meaning that this doesn't work very well if we're talking about older versions of VMware. And generally, people that are on like perpetual licensing, version 6, that maybe upgraded to 7, not realizing that version 8 was going to cost so much money, they usually have systems that were created in the MBR faction, and when you go to migrate them, that configuration unfortunately retains the old versioning, meaning that even if you're on 8, if it was created in 6, chances are you're on an MBR. You may not even realize you're on an MBR, but most of VMware's configuration uses an MBR. And as a result, what happens is when you try to migrate, it will corrupt when it goes to the VHDX file. This unfortunately also seems to happen if you're running Datto-based appliances for your backups. Now, Veeam is interesting because Veeam actually allows you to take a snapshot of the running operating system and not the VMDK file. So if it's not a bare metal recovery, as in the full backup from the actual VMDK file at the ESXi level, and it's an actual image of the server that's running, then you can restore it and it works fine. But if you're taking a snapshot of the VMDK file itself, they have a tendency of corrupting on the actual import for the VHDX file. So I'm going to show you today a solution that works on pretty much 99% of the time. Almost all situations of a VMDK to a VHDX, this actual software will actually do it. The only thing is the software requires you to run Linux. So we're going to start this off on the Linux side, but I want to just point out that I'm not going to go into the VMware server itself. You should know, if you're looking at doing this, you should already know how to launch a system in the vSphere and then, or launch a system, connect to vSphere, and then download the VMDK directly to your system without me explaining the step-by-step process to that. That should be pretty self-explanatory. If you're looking to do this that's the first step you'll have to do, is how do you download those VMDKs off of the system? And you're going to need an external hard drive. I'm going to suggest that you make sure that your external hard drive is at least USB 3.0, if not USB 3.2 or 3.1, so that way you can get that full 10 gig, because the reality is that this process requires you to turn the servers off, and it's really not a long process, assuming that your equipment is fast. But if you're running like a 10th gen Intel processor at work and you have USB 3.0 with no 3.2, and you're talking about a USB 2.0 external like 14 terabyte hard drive that's like a 5400 RPM drive, you could be there for days. So I would strongly suggest that you get yourself a 7200 RPM drive. I would even suggest that maybe looking at a Toshiba, just because Toshibas tend to have a bigger cache when it comes to their drives themselves. SATA drive. So grab a 7200 large cache Toshiba drive. They're going to be a little more expensive, yes, but it'll save you a ton of time on the back end for your actual conversion. And then once you download your VMDK files to your external hard drive, obviously put them in a folder structure so you can keep track, right? So you'll have your C drive, your D drive, your E drive, your F drive, whatever it is for your file server, and then maybe just a C drive for your domain controller. And make sure you correctly mark or notate what the actual drives are that you're downloading to that external disk, and create a folder structure that it's easy to follow what is what and where it is, because it'll make a big difference on the front end when we get to the hypervisor server, how you do the restore. Okay guys, so now that we're in our Ubuntu system and we're going to use Ubuntu to do our conversion, what we're going to do first is we're going to click on the Show Apps icon down on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, and we're going to choose Terminal to open up a terminal in our Ubuntu system. And much like all of our other videos, we're going to start off with running the update. So we're going to do sudo space apt space update and hit enter. You will get prompted for creds. Enter your creds to run the update on the system. Once your update completes, then let's upgrade all the packages. In order to do that, we're just going to do sudo space apt space upgrade space -y and hit enter. The next step in our process is to install the Qemu utils application. Now, for those that don't know, Qemu or Qemu, whatever it is, this application is itself a virtualization platform, much like you would have in VMware Workstation, or you would have in a Microsoft hypervisor, or even a ProxMox type of configuration. Although it may be the only one that I'm aware of that supports ARM-based processors. But our installation process is not going to require us to set up a hypervisor of some kind in order to run this Qemu application. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to just install the utilities, because the utilities is the application we need to convert a VMDK to a VHDX. So once you have this entered, hit enter on your keyboard to install the application. You'll note you may get prompted to hit Y to continue. If you do, hit Y and then hit enter. Generally speaking, when you install these applications, they install the latest version. However, sometimes that doesn't happen, and if it doesn't happen, it could cause issues. So I always suggest running this sudo apt update after you install packages. Even though, technically speaking, you should have the latest package installed, sometimes, based on your configuration of your particular system, running this command can update additional packages that have to be used with the application you just installed. So it's always important to run it before, run the actual install, and then run it after to just confirm that everything matches in the same version. All right, so we have the application we need, the utilities installed. However, I will warn you that there is a GUI made for this application. It's called Zenity. It allows you to use a GUI to control the actual Qemu application, but don't use it. It doesn't work right. It's buggy. It crashes. And when it crashes, generally, it still continues to run the process in the back end. And then if you try to run the same process again, it'll cause the first one to corrupt. You end up with disk issues. It's just not worth using. So scratch that, don't use it, just use the command line inside of our configuration in order to convert those files to the correct ones for our VHDX configuration. Another thing I'll warn you of is that technically the Qemu program, or Qemu, whatever it is, does have an option for Mac as well as Windows. Neither of those applications work correctly. The Mac version doesn't work correctly on the VMDK files, but it works fine on the VHDX. And then the Windows version, ironically, doesn't work with the VHDX files, but works fine with the VMDK. Meaning that when you run it, you can convert it, but then it'll throw an error indicating that it doesn't have the ability to convert it to the VHDX. Now, I did a little research on that and found out that the reason why is apparently the VHDX configuration on a Windows system is considered closed source, but the VHDX configuration itself as an extension is not closed source, meaning that if you run it on a Linux box, it uses the open source conversion, but if you run it on a Windows box, it's closed source and it will fail the conversion. So unfortunately, if you want a way to do this correctly, or at least a way that I know works for sure, you're gonna have to do it this way. Otherwise, you could try all those other alternatives that we've reviewed or touched base on in this video, and I can tell you that you'll have variables. Sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't, but they're not consistent, whereas this is consistent. So on my machine, what I did is I popped in an external hard drive, and that external hard drive has a snapshot of a desktop that I have. And my desktop is just simply desktop.vmdk as we see on the screen. Now we could use our command line box here and we could navigate directly to the clean location. However, I'm going to show you an easier way to do this. We're going to start by right-clicking in an open area and simply choose Open in Terminal. Now, if you come from a Windows environment, then you know like CD space, and then you'll do C:\\, and you know that in Linux everything is /, but sometimes the paths can get a little confusing. So if you're not really sure where something is, you could simply just right-click in an open space and open terminal in that location. You could see now the full path as to where this particular file is. I figured that would be helpful for people that are not used to a Linux-based environment getting into a Linux system to run this conversion. Now, before we run this, what I'm going to suggest you do is create a folder inside of your USB drive where you have your VMDK file and just call it output. Once you have that data entered, just hit create. And we'll see now we have a folder called output. So we're going to jump back over into our command line here. We're going to enter the command to do the conversion of our VMDK file and put it into the output folder. So what is that command? Well, the command's pretty simple, actually. It's just sudo space QEMU -img space convert space -f as in Frank space VMDK space -o as in Oregon. That's not a 0, it's an O, and it has to be capitalized. Space VHDX space, then we'll see my desktop.vmdk, which is the file up here, and then we're going to do a space /output. So dot means in this folder, in this location already, and then the / is the output here, so the output folder is after the /, and then / again, and we're going to call it my desktop.vhdx. So what this command means, it means use the Qemu image software to convert the format of VMDK and output it as VHDX. Then we're going to say to use my desktop.vmdk as the file, as the source, and then we're going to use the ./output, which is the output folder, / my desktop.vhdx as the output file. Now, once you have this entered, you just simply hit enter on the keyboard. It's going to prompt you probably for credentials. Enter your credentials, and it'll start to run. And there it goes. It is now running. Now, you probably can't hear it through the actual microphone, but I do have an external hard drive in a carrier right next to me, so I know that it is now flashing, flickering, and I can hear it running next to me. The thing is if you're doing this remotely and you're on the VMware server, obviously it's going to be difficult for you to hear that it's actually doing something. You can drill down into the output folder and you could see that we now have the mydesktop.vhdx file. You can right-click on it and see the size. And then obviously if you do a refresh on the screen and then right-click on it again, we should see that the size does increase. So you can do that to keep track of it. Unfortunately, for this particular application, there's not a really good GUI or output to show you percentage, how much is going through. So if you know that the original one is like a couple gigs or a couple hundred gigs or a couple hundred terabytes, then, obviously you're going to have to periodically just check to see what's going on in the actual file, the output file, to see if it's actually growing. So it's not a perfect solution to the situation, but I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that this works better than any of the applications I've tried. It also takes the least amount of time because This Qemu image converter tool, or the Qemu utilities, they come with a utility for deduplication. And when this is running, it'll actually dedupe the file, meaning that if the file is 2 terabytes in a total partition, but maybe the file size itself is only a couple hundred gigs, it'll only output a couple hundred gig file, meaning that it dedupes the file so it's not so tremendous when you actually copy it over to its new resting place and home. There's a couple caveats we should touch base on though. If you're doing this on a live system, then obviously you have VMware tools installed. You're going to have to uninstall the VMware tools on the system on the VMware server side before you do the conversion. Because if you don't, unfortunately, they will cause an error. Usually it's a .NET Framework error on the hypervisor side. And generally speaking, you can't remove them. For whatever reason, it crashes once you launch the system and it will not allow you to remove them. But assuming that you follow this step-by-step procedure and you've watched this far, then realistically, this shouldn't be an issue because now I've just told you something that you have to do before you really run this process so that way everything works correctly. I would tell you, obviously, watch these videos that I create, but watch them completely through and then go back and follow them step-by-step through this procedure so you know specifically what to look at, what caveats, what catches, what gotchas exist, so that way you could follow the entire process and be successful. Another thing to keep in mind is obviously the VMDK file has to be turned off. So the server needs to be turned off on the VMware side before you do this process. And once you get it on the other side, you're going to have to reconfigure your network adapter. Unfortunately, in this process, it's not going to retain the original network adapter settings because the physical hardware on the other side is going to be different. And as a result, if you have a static IP address, it won't use a static IP. If you have licensing that's linked to a MAC address, you can, on the hypervisor side, virtualize the MAC address, which should allow you to retain that license key. However, obviously, it's a 50-50 shot. It is a gamble because not all are created equal. Assuming you follow this step-by-step procedure, this will create your VHDX file, and then you can mount that on the other side on your hypervisor server, launch it, and you're good to go. Something else I will point out is that on the hypervisor side, when you go to mount it, you'll have a choice between Gen 1 and Gen 2. If that system is like a 2012 R2 system or it was created in ESXi version 6, you need to use Gen 1 because if you use Gen 2, it's going to introduce a trusted platform module and then the system just will not boot. And then obviously, if there's additional disks that have to go with your actual system, so you have a C drive, a D drive, an E drive, an F drive, they're all going to create individual VMDK files. That's something that is going to be much different than that StarWind application, which is going to combine them into a single VHDX file. But since it will create individual VMDK files, you'll have to run this process for every single one. So obviously, creating output -C if it's the C drive and output -E for the E drive is a smart decision so you can keep track of which drives are which. Because when you mount them on the VHDX side, on the actual hypervisor side, you want to mount the C drive as the primary partition, and then the E drive, F drive, and so on and so forth as your secondary, third, or fourth partitions, so that way the system boots correctly. So we're going to finish this video right here, guys, and if you want to know how to do a proper hypervisor configuration, leave something down in the comments, and I'll put together a video of a how-to on setting up the hypervisor correctly, so that way these files do copy over correctly to the hypervisor, and it doesn't cause you a nightmare on the configuration side to troubleshoot and get things up and running. If you're interested in something like that, leave something down in the comments, and I will definitely post the follow-up video with how to correctly configure Microsoft Hypervisor. For the time being, hopefully this helps somebody out, understanding, of course, that since VMware is now $100,000 in most cases for licensing, you could typically buy an entire server and all the labor and the configuration on the hypervisor side and still save money versus purchasing a license for 1 to 3 years from VMware. And now you know how to do the conversion from the VMDK files to the VHDX files, so it should make your life that much easier. Leave me something down in the comments if you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.